Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. I am John Schmeelk, thrilled to be joined by Lance Medow, right here in the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. Lance, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are things with you?
Doing all right. Back. Now I'm in get ready for the combine mode, where I'm basically trying to get through the top 30 to 50 guys prospect-wise and make sure. I'm lucky. Like, a lot of these guys either watched their 2024 tape already, or at least the beginning, first month or two of their year this year. So I kind of have a feel for them, so I can kind of finish it quickly. So I think I'm actually going to be in pretty good shape having most of those guys done. But just getting ready for the Super Bowl, man. I mean, it's the last competitive, real football game we're going to see in about 7 months.
Yep.
And I thought this might be a good day. I think we do this show pretty much every year. I think we do this pretty much. I think it's usually me and you that do it too, where we take a look at these two teams and we see what we can learn from these two teams that maybe can apply to the Giants. Now, one thing that I mentioned with Paul the other day, Lance, is that the Patriots are very similar to where the Giants were last year to where the Giants were this year, right? They changed coaches, second-year quarterback. Now, there's some differences, too, and I'm going to do a Giants Huddle podcast. I'm recording at 2 o'clock today with Doug Kaid from, he covers the Patriots, does a great job. He's out there in San Francisco, and we're going to kind of break down all those similarities. But so rather than team like that type of talk, it's going to be more, what are these teams particularly good at? You know, has the way you win in the NFL a little bit different now than maybe it was the last couple of years? And Lance, I think the first thing that jumps out of me this year, by the way, we'll take your calls too if you want to talk about the Giants coaching staff, their coordinators. I'll give Lance a chance to give his quick spiel on Matt Nagy. He has a chance to do that. So whatever you want to give us a call and talk about, we could certainly do that at 201-939-4513. But to me, the thing that jumps out, Lance, is that neither of these teams has that tried and true blue blood. We know this guy's the top 5-6 quarterback in football heading into the year. Now, Drake May, maybe he's developed into that guy, and I think that's kind of a question we need to ask once this game's over. His postseason hasn't been the best, but it's been some tough weather, et cetera, et cetera. I still don't think the offensive structure around him is great. Like Stephon Diggs and Kayshon Boutte as two top wide receivers, they're fine. Their offensive line has struggled over the past couple of weeks. They have a rookie left tackle. Yeah, a lot of young guys, exactly right. So, you know, but this isn't like your traditional, we're paying the quarterback $60 million and we're trying to figure out how to build around that $50, $60 million quarterback, right? Darnold's on that mid-tier contract that they've built around him, a really good team, especially on defense, while the Patriots have Drake May on that rookie contract, and that enabled them to spend over $200 million in guaranteed money in the offseason to sign a bunch of free agents. So I think that formula, first and foremost, when I look at these two teams, which is similar to what the Giants are in right now, quarterback on a rookie contract, can you be a little bit more aggressive building around that guy, given that quarterback's not making a ton of money yet?
Well, the way they were aggressive, to just piggyback over your point, John, I would say is they steered the free agency conversation towards the defensive side of the ball, given the fact that a lot of their resources were not tied up, to your point, on the offensive side. You know, Darnold clearly was a splash signing because quarterbacks are going to get paid, but nothing compared to the extensions that we see to some of these other proven quarterbacks. And Drake May is still on a rookie contract.
I mean, Darnold makes half of what Dak Prescott makes.
So what both of these teams said, and keep in mind, Mike McDonald and Mike Vrabel are defensive-minded coaches, okay? And Vrabel saw New England win Super Bowls. Yes, they had Tom Brady, but Bill Belichick's defenses were also strong. So I think both of those organizations, they said to themselves, okay, we know we don't have a top 5 quarterback. We know that we're not going to put up 30-some-odd points per game, but we know that if our defense is solid, we're not going to put our offense in a position, a precarious spot where they have to all of a sudden light up the scoreboard. And I think that principle, that structure is what worked this season, John, because you look at some of the personnel that was brought in. Seattle went out and got DeMarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys, and they reaped the rewards instantaneously, which is not a surprise. He's a proven veteran player. Well, New England did the same thing. They brought in Harold Landry, who Vrabel was familiar with going back to their Tennessee days. They brought Milton Williams in from the Eagles. Now, Williams missed a few games due to injury, but I would say those two certainly made a significant impact. And another name that I would not overlook is Robert Spillane.
100%.
Okay, the veteran linebacker who was with the Steelers. Those three players
You said Carlton Davis was one of the three?
I did not mention him, but I was focusing more on the guys up front.
I got you.
But yeah, Davis you could certainly throw into the mix. You know, this is...
And by the way, you know, Chase on too, right? I mean, it's another guy. These guys have all been...
They were very aggressive on that front.
And they hit like 1,000.
Yeah.
They hit on all of them, which is the amazing part of it.
Correct. You don't normally do that. And listen, you and I have had multiple conversations, many different years, and I will still stand by this.
So do I.
You don't win in free agency by doing that consistently in the offseason. Normally, free agency should be a complementary weapon, not the main ingredient. But I think, once again, what was different about both of these teams' approaches is they focus really solely within one facet of the team, John, as opposed to take all the money and just spread it across the board or throw it up against the wall and hope for the best. So the bottom line is both of these general managers, whether it be Elliott Wolf for New England or John Schneider for Seattle, they were very focused in their approach. And I think that's the difference as to why they had very quick success in where they put a lot of their money, as opposed to other teams that just sprinkle it everywhere and just hope for the best.
Yeah, and the Seahawks with trades too, right? They traded for Ernest Jones. That was last year, I believe,
Jones
right?
was re-signed.
Mid-season
Correct.
last
That was
year.
2 years ago.
They re-signed him, and they traded for Leonard Williams and then re-signed him.
Yep.
So while not traditional free agent signings, those two players have been hugely important to that Seahawks defense. So I'm with you. And then you brought up my number 2, so I'll just bring it up now before I let you do your first one. 2 defensive-oriented coaches, head coaches, that have found top offensive coordinators, right? Vrabel, again, not technically a defensive head coach, but he's not calling the plays on defense.
Well, that's the side of the ball he played. I know he caught few touchdowns in the Super Bowl, but he was a defensive player.
And even though he will say he doesn't, and Zach Kirk calls the defense and Terrell Williams and all that stuff, he has an impact on that side of the ball. Yep. But he found a great offensive coordinator in Mike McDaniel, who...
Josh McDaniel.
Josh McDaniel, who you leave there and you say, go do your thing. I don't got to worry about it. And then for the Seahawks, you have Mike McDonald, not Mike McDaniel, who sits there and calls the defense. And he found a young up-and-coming coordinator in Clint Kubiak, who's going to be the head coach of the Raiders when all this is said and done in a couple of days, to run that side of the ball. So, we're in an era, Lance, where a lot of people are looking for that next best hotshot play caller to be the head coach. These two teams did it a different way. CEO head coach that has a defensive lean, a play-calling defensive head coach that found good offensive coordinators, and that's how it worked for these two teams. There's no McVay in this game. There's no Shanahan in this game. None of those guys, and Andy Reid, that are known to be offensive play callers. It's been 2 defensive-minded head coaches that led their teams this far.
And Josh McDaniels has an excellent track record. That would have been my number 1. I mean, we went into free agency, but I think Vrabel hiring Josh McDaniels, remember, he comes into a team, he inherits a young quarterback, and you've been listening to me talk about this till I'm blue in the face. The revolving door of offensive coordinators is the way to kill a quarterback. Now, there's exceptions to the rule. Alex Smith, to me, is the poster child, what the Niners did to him. And granted, he dealt with injuries, but you'd be very hard-pressed to find a franchise that kept bringing in new OC after new OC. And in fairness, sometimes you have no control over it. They get hired as head coaches.
Like the Philadelphia Eagles, for example.
So I'm not going to blame Kellen Moore for getting a job or whatever it may be. That happens. But there are also teams that are guilty of, John, they borrow a guy for a year, all of a sudden they have buyer's remorse and they want to move on.
And those are usually the teams that are unsuccessful.
Without a doubt.
Yes.
Now, in Seattle's circumstance, you brought up Clint Kubiak. Well, McDonald did his first year. He brought in Ryan Grubb. Now, Ryan Grubb was from Washington. He said, let me get creative. Let me bring in a college mind. And let's see if that could translate to the NFL.
It did not.
Well, it didn't, but, in fairness, the Seahawks did win 10 games a year ago.
Correct.
They missed the playoffs.
The offense struggled, though.
Correct. The offense did struggle. And remember, not only did they part ways with their OC, they parted ways with a quarterback in Geno Smith. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure McDonald said, listen, if we're going to go in a completely different direction.
And their offensive line coach, by the way, got recycled out of there, too.
If we're going to go in a different direction with Sam Darnold, I might as well go towards a coordinator that, may have had some history with being in San Francisco and seeing whether or not we can batch that up and box it up and hope that it could translate to Seattle. And it did work. So I think both coaches deserve credit for not sticking with what they inherited or had the previous year, saying we needed to make a change and bringing in individuals that either come from a good coaching tree, which is Kubiak, or McDaniels, who has an excellent track record.
It's funny, though, because the Kubiak thing actually works against one of your bugaboos. They gave up on the coordinator after a year. And they switched him out. Now, it wasn't the same quarterback. You're switching quarterbacks. So it's not like you're switching coordinators on a young quarterback.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a little bit different. But I think it tells you that if it's not working, just make the change, especially if you don't think it's going to adversely affect somebody that's on your roster. You're getting a new quarterback anyway, bring in a new system if you don't like the last one, and kind of figure it out. The next one I'll do, Lance, real quick. Both these two teams, waves of players on the defensive front. This is the Seahawks' backup group of defensive linemen. Jaron Reed, Derek Hall, and Boye Mafe. There are teams that would love to have those guys as starters on their teams.
Yep.
They're backing up Leonard Williams, big money guy, former first-round pick. Byron Murphy, former first-round pick. DeMarcus Lawrence, former second-round pick, longtime borderline Pro Bowl caliber player, I guess. I guess you put him in that category, right? And then Uchenna Nwosu, who they drafted themselves. He was either, I think he was a third-round pick. He was either day 2 or day 3 pick.
I believe Nwosu was from the Chargers, John.
Oh, was he with the Chargers?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
No, you're right. You're right. He was playing behind Bosa and Mack there. I remember this now. Did not get a ton of snaps, but his pass rush percentages were good.
He's fantastic. He's an underrated player. He's dealt with injuries over the last few years. That's been his problem.
But he's been healthy this year. So waves a guy there, and then you look. We talked already about what the Patriots did in the offseason, right? Bringing in Landry, bringing in Chason, Milton Williams, Christian Barmore, Kairos Tonga, another one of those free agents they brought in this offseason that hit for them. So make sure you have a lot of guys that you could roll in there on that defensive front where it's waves of rushers. So that's another thing. You can never have enough pass rushers if you want to be a successful defense.
Because both of these teams also dealt with injuries this season, okay? They're not necessarily unique in that regard. As I mentioned, Milton Williams, who was a noticeable free agent, he only played 12 games, okay? You do the math. That means he missed 5. But they didn't necessarily fall off a cliff. And even if you look at, not to say that sacks is the end-all, be-all. Remember, quarterback pressures, but case in point, Seattle had 47 sacks this season. Now, if you go through the list of what each individual did.
No one had 10, right?
Nobody had 10.
No.
That was going to be my exact point. You took the words out of my mouth. So, it was a spread the wealth mentality.
Who led them? Murphy? Was he first?
With respect to their
Sacks.
total, let's see. I see a few guys with 7. I don't think anybody had more than 7.
7 was the most, huh?
Yeah, Leonard Williams had 7. Byron Murphy had 7. And Nwosu had 7. So you had 3 guys with 7. But the point is, it's not to say that you shouldn't yearn for a Pro Bowl guy that gives you double-digit sacks, but this idea that you need that home run hitter and you can't maybe piecemeal a bunch of really good players together and be productive based on the scheme, to me, is just not truthful. I think Seattle is evident of that, and then even if you look up New England's numbers, it's very similar.
All power players, Lance. DeMarcus Lawrence is a power defensive end. Leonard Williams is a powerful defensive tackle. Byron Murphy, a powerful defensive tackle. Nwosu's a little bit more on the smaller side.
Yeah, more of a finesse
guy that can win off the edge, but power players. Christian Barmore, power player. Milton Williams, interior defensive rusher. So they have these guys that are big, powerful, strong defensive linemen too, which I think is notable.
And I think they've also developed some guys in the secondary, Seattle, through the draft. So, they have the backing for good cover guys who are aided by a very strong front and team that also was quite opportunistic. You look at the fact that they had 18 interceptions, okay? That's a nice number to have in terms of the average for the regular season. And once again, you bring up New England's numbers, and I was reviewing them over the last few days too, and you're going to see very similar tallies in terms of what Vrabel was able to get out of this group. And I don't think that this is a coincidence. I think if you look at the sack numbers, they're a little bit lower, but you've got Landry with 8.5. You've got Chason with 7.5. Williams, even though he was banged up, gave you 3.5. Then, Ponder, a rotational guy, gave you 4. It's once again sprinkled across the board. And then interceptions, they had one guy with 4, one guy with 3, one guy with 2. So they at least had double-digit interceptions when it was all said and done. The numbers are not identical, but they're at least in the same ballpark in terms of guys making plays on the ball on the back end, getting after the quarterback up front, and not giving up a boatload of points. These were both scoring defenses, John, that allowed under 20 points per game. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be a good defense if you give up 22, but think about what that does to two quarterbacks that have not had consistency whether it's sample size or what they've done from team to team in terms of making good decisions and protecting the football. Darnold had issues with picks. Last few years, he's been better. And Drake May was sacked like crazy even this season. He was sacked 47 times this year. Despite that,
he will hold the ball.
Didn't kill them.
Absolutely. And look, just getting back to your point that you just made to build on it, look at the corners on these two teams. The Patriots are rolling out Carlton Davis, who has a history of being a good man-to-man corner in the league. Christian Gonzalez, who I think is already a top 5 corner in the NFL. Pick. Phenomenal. Thank goodness the Commanders picked Emmanuel Forbes over him. I mean, thank goodness. Then you have Marcus Jones, who's a really good nickelback, one of your favorites, I know, because he's on the less tall side. Then you have the Seahawks. Reek Woolen, who's going to, by the way, make banking for agency this year. But he's a guy that has developed from being a 5th-round pick from a small school. Devin Witherspoon, who we all know what a good first-round pick he is. And Nick Emenwari, he's their slot. I know he's technically a safety, but he's basically plays slot corner for them, whether teams are in 2 tight ends or not. And it's his size and ability to kind of keep them in nickel, even when teams go with multiple tight ends, that makes that defense special. So they all have guys that can cover and do their jobs. And I think the impact of the 2 nickels on these teams especially, I already talked about Emenwari, the fact that he's 230 pounds, he can play the run, he can play the pass. And then the Patriots, it's funny how the slot position now can be so variant from team to team. Marcus Jones is like 5'8", 175 pounds. He plays the same position as Nick Emenwari, who's over 6 foot 230, but he does it well in a different way. So have a good nickel that can cover and stop the run. Jones is a turnover machine, also great on special teams, by the way. But they both have corners outside that when you need to man up and prevent passes from getting completed out there, they can do it. So look at the corners on these defenses. Combined with those defensive fronts we talked about, it's no surprise that these 2 teams have played defense as well as they have over the past couple of months.
Well, and then if you bring the Giants into the conversation, John, I would say, that was a point that hurt them this season, the cornerback position overall.
They had the pass rush, but not the corner position.
So, you look at New England, you look at Seattle, I would say opposite ends of the spectrum as we tie this into the theme of teachable lessons. The other thing that I think shouldn't be lost with respect to both of these teams, I think especially New England, and this pertains to the Giants, non-household name wide receivers that stepped up for Drake May. I know you said you didn't have a love affair with their receiving core, and I agree with you.
No, but they did good enough.
It's not necessarily a long-term group,
right.
But, Keyshawn Boutte, Mac Hollins, those guys made plays. Maybe not every single game are they putting up 100 yards, but there were timing, there were moments throughout the season, even during the playoffs,
number of big-time plays.
Especially
100%.
Boutte in the postseason, where you would say, all right, they stepped up and came through for Drake May. It wasn't just the Stephon Diggs show. And Diggs, say all you want about him, he had a really good season, okay? He had over 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
He made big plays.
Quiet in the postseason. So far.
But, hey, they needed to get to the postseason first, and I think Diggs put his stamp all over it. But I've been impressed with the Keyshawn Bouttes of the world who, if you did a fantasy lesson in all of this, he'd be, low on the totem pole in terms of who you even think about from just a mathematical standpoint. But in reality, that's how football's decided, and he came through and I thought made some timely plays. The other thing that happened for them is Travion Henderson, their rookie running back, who, when he did get some playing time towards the midway point of the season, he showed more than just flashes to give them a boost with, once again, a young, untested offensive line. And then even in Seattle's department, they decided to move on, remember, from their veteran wide receivers. DK Metcalf goes to the Steelers. Lockett, they move on from. And Jackson Smith and Jigba, of course, was on the team and had a stellar season. But I would argue that the complementary pieces for the Seahawks were also significant.
Well, trading for Rashid Shaheed was a big deal for them.
From the Saints, and also what he did on special teams, too.
Yep.
You were talking about Marcus Jones for New England. Well, you could put in the Saints acquisition was a game changer for them. I mean, look at what he did during this playoff run in terms of changing field positioning. So, that was significant. But even over the course of this season, whether it be Cooper Kupp, who they brought in from the Rams making plays, Torrey Horton, I thought at times during the regular season, it wasn't consistent, but there were stretches where they needed him.
I think he has a bright future, but he's hurt now. Yes.
And he was able to come through for Sam Darnold and utilize some tight ends. And then, of course, Charbonnet before he got hurt and Walker providing a nice 1-2 punch out of the backfield. But don't dismiss this comes back to circle to Booty and Horton, I think, are the poster children of what I'm talking about, where somebody who may be a bit of a hidden gem on your depth chart, somebody else gets hurt, who you turn to and build some decent rapport with their quarterback.
Does it make you think, because one of the big needs we've talked a lot about this offseason is bringing a number 2 wide receiver, right, to play across from Malik Neighbors. If they retain Wan'Dale Robinson in free agency, seeing how these two teams that are in the Super Bowl have gotten there, and even look at the Broncos. They were in the AFC Championship game. Other than, Cortland Sutton, what are they running out? Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims? Like, they're not running out some Pat Bryant. Like, these aren't household name wide receivers,
and the tight ends,
right?
with Ingram and company.
Now, the Rams on the other side of the spectrum rolling out Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. They have 2 monsters, obviously. But does it make you think, all right, maybe Neighbors, Robinson, and Slayton are enough, given what you've seen from these two teams in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think on paper, you got to hope that they stay healthy, of course. That's the big caveat, because then all of a sudden you have to start worrying about, John, to your point, who's 4, who's 5, and do you trust that they'll step up? But, Wan'Dale Robinson is going to cost, I think, more money. Here's the differential than some of the other players that New England and Seattle brought in. So that definitely changes the thinking. From the Giants' perspective, you have to take more resources and put it towards the wide receiver position than what these two teams were talking about. So it's not necessarily apples to apples from that scenario, but if you do make it work, yes, to answer your question, I think that trio is enough, but I would still want a younger wide receiver in that mix to be able to turn to in the event that one of them gets hurt, and also work that young wide receiver in who you feel when you have to maybe move on from one of those 3, there's a natural transition. Much like, once again, I'll get back to my point about Seattle. Jackson Smith and Jigba was brought in before they parted ways with Metcalf and Lockett. So even though they lost both of them, they got a taste of what Smith and Jigba brings to the table, and it wasn't as much of the land of the unknown as you see with other teams where, okay, you get rid of veterans and you really don't have an idea of what you have behind them. Seattle knew. They got a taste of what they had. I think that made them feel a little bit more comfortable moving on from some of those proven commodities.
Yeah, no, look, I'm with you 100%. Yeah, I'm with you though. I agree. I would still try to bring in that young wide receiver.
Well, you could do that through the draft, John.
Yeah,
you don't
100%.
necessarily have to do that through free agency. They could draft a player.
And that's what I would focus on, 100%. All right, give me your little spiel on Matt Nagy before we get to the calls here.
Well, I'm a big person in terms of track record.
And again, this is just reported. It's not official. We're not confirming it. According to reports, if it happens, Lance, give me your take. Sorry.
No, absolutely. We always have to throw in that caveat. And, all joking aside, truth be told, we already saw it with respect to the potential offensive coordinator for the Giants. So, that's another reason why when all of us are on this show, we always have that phrase before we delve into it, because, Todd Monken was a popular name, John, that was brought up. And then what happened? Cleveland hired him as their head coach, and that had to change the trajectory of where John Harbaugh wanted to go. I go back to track record of the NFL with respect to, you have to look at what a head coach has done throughout the course of his career. And that's why this addition reportedly was not surprising to me, even though maybe if you read some of the other reports, he may have not been in the driver's seat. Well, if you look at all the offensive coordinators, and I did this in greater detail on a previous show, I'm not going to redo it, but you look at everyone that has run an offense, John, for John Harbaugh has either been a previous head coach or a proven NFL offensive coordinator. He has not taken chances on a guy from college. He has not taken chances on a quarterback coach in the NFL and boosted him up. He wants proven. He wants somebody that he knows can command a room and can run an offense, and you're not taking off the training wheels. So that's why this Matt Nagy addition, to me, falls perfectly in line with what Harbaugh has done. Cam Cameron was the previous Chargers OC, Dolphins head coach. Jim Caldwell was the Colts head coach. Gary Kubiak was the Broncos OC and the Texans head coach. Mark Trestman, multiple OC Bears head coach. Marty Morningweg, multiple OC Lions head coach. Greg Roman, Niners Bills OC, and Todd Monken was a Bucks and a Browns OC. Ran that through you quickly to show you he did not once again bring in anyone to steer his offense who was in the land of the unknown. Matt Nagy, longtime OC, specifically with the Chiefs, and of course was the head coach of the Bears.
Though ironically, only called plays as a head coach, never called plays as an
correct,
offensive
because
coordinator.
Kansas City had Andy Reid, but at least was within a scheme on the NFL level, I would argue.
No, I agree.
And has had hands-on experience in that department. And that, I think, matters to John Harbaugh. Also, you're handing over this individual the reins to a scheme that is going to have to be guided by a quarterback only in year 2 in his career. Do you really want somebody, and listen, this is not a shot, let me make this clear, against Charlie Weiss Jr., even though he had history with Jackson Dart, but you're taking still a chance if you went in that direction, John.
Of course you are.
For somebody that has not had NFL experience, even though there may be appeal. And I'll go back to, this is where there's so many things that are connected to the conversations we're having. You just talked about Mike Macdonald, and we were discussing the fact that he moved on from Ryan Grubb after 1 year, and he brought in Clint Kubiak. Well, Grubb, he took a flyer on. He brought him in from a college scheme without an NFL backing, and it didn't necessarily work out. I don't think Harbaugh wanted to go down that road. Now, as far as the quarterbacks that Nagy has worked with, clearly he had the luxury of Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, and Jackson Dart is not Patrick Mahomes, at least at this stage in his career. So looking at the numbers and the trends there, I really don't think teaches us much. So you look at Justin Fields in Chicago and some of the other quarterbacks, the Mitchell Trubiskys of the world. Not to say that, once again, they're equivalent or similar to Jackson Dart, but I think there's more to be learned from his Chicago tenure, plus the fact that, as you pointed out, he actually ran the scheme there compared to what he did in Kansas City, because Mahomes is the outlier. As an offensive coordinator, whether you're running the offense, whether you're calling plays, when you have Mahomes at the controls, just like we talk about when you have Aaron Rodgers running your offensive scheme, or we could go with Josh Allen or all of these other proven commodities. Any offensive coordinator, whether they're at the younger stage of their career or the latter stage of the career, they will tell you, John, that when they screw up on a call or where they don't read the defense correctly, it's nice to have a quarterback that can make a change and could be your eraser.
The quarterback
right?
can fix it.
Correct. When you have a young quarterback, and whether it's a Justin Fields at Chicago or a Jackson Dart in the Giants, you're not yet at the point where you have that edit button at your disposal. So that is going to be the key for Matt Nagy. He is going to have to shoulder a lot more with respect to this Giants offense than what was going on in Kansas City. It's much more similar, to circle back to my main point, of what transpired in Chicago than anything you could take away from Kansas City. Because I know a lot of people, the first thing you do is you see an OC, okay, who did he work with? Where did the offense rank? I didn't even bother to tweet out or do a lot of research on where Kansas City ranked, because I just don't think you're going to take away much of anything. The lessons to be learned are from the Bears more so than the Chiefs.
And that was so long ago, and the league has changed so much since then. I'm not even sure how much you could take out of that.
Very valid
I think we're in very wait-and-see mood for what this is going to look like. Like, does John Harbaugh, and I said this to Paul, does he give him strict parameters as to what he wants his offense to look like? And say, all right, Matt Nagy, I'm not going to let you paint a picture, but I'm giving you a picture and you get to color it in. You know what I mean?
I think that's certainly something that, if I'm Harbaugh, I would want to toy with and give direction in terms of the blueprint.
Because Harbaugh's offenses traditionally have not looked like what the Chiefs have done in Kansas City.
Yep. I mean, I think he adapted a little bit with Monken's philosophy and what he brought to the table.
There was
with
still
Lamar.
a lot of under center play action.
No,
stuff,
without a
which is
doubt.
not what Matt Nagy does.
Sure. So I think Nagy is going to have to adapt and buy into what Harbaugh is preaching, and that's why I think the process, according to reports, assuming, once again, the Nagy deal is finalized, it took some time because Harbaugh had to speak to some veteran play callers and say, listen, I understand what you ran over here, but this is how I went about my business in Baltimore, and these are the core principles and philosophies that I want. By the way, on a somewhat related note, I've been watching all the introductory pressers. I mean, I make that a habit every cycle, but I specifically paid close attention, even more so, to the Todd Monken presser. Monken talked a little bit about Harbaugh in that presser, and the one thing that I took away from that press conference, and I clipped it from the presser and I tweeted out in case anybody wants to listen to it. he gave an example because when a head coach doesn't call plays, you wonder how much influence, John, they have during the course of the game or what happens behind the scenes. And Monken gave an example, and he was talking about how much offensive schemes have changed and how everybody goes for it now on fourth down and the creativeness of the play calling when he first came in as an offensive coordinator on the NFL level when he was with the Bucs to where he is now. Baltimore ran an interesting play in Week 11 in a tight game, coincidentally, against the Browns, where they put Mark Andrews, their tight end, under center on what looked to be a quarterback sneak. And Andrews wound up rolling out and running for a 35-yard touchdown.
Okay.
So Monken was talking about how that play was put in weeks prior. They worked on it, they honed it, and they were waiting for the perfect time. You know, like anything else, you don't take all of your weapons and secrets at your disposal and just throw it out there the week of that game when you practice it. No, you wait for the right time. And Harbaugh picked the right time, but it was also his idea to have them branch off of that play where it's not just a typical quarterback sneak or tush push. It's actually running the tight end off the edge, and he got a perfect alley, and the rest is history. He ran for a touchdown. So I thought that was a great example of what you were maybe just hinting at, that Nagy's the offensive coordinator, but Harbaugh's going to have some tricks up his sleeve that he's going to float out maybe early in the season that Nagy should take into consideration for what they could capitalize on later in the season. And just the timing of when John chooses to implement those things could go a long way between an extra win here or there that, once again, keeps you in the fold, whatever happens during the course of the season, which was the case for the Baltimore Ravens. The other thing that Monken brought up when just describing what it was like to work with, he combined Kirby Smart and John Harbaugh. He called John Harbaugh specifically elite at messaging with a team, meaning how to mesh with his players. And I want to read you an exact quote. On Harbaugh, this is what he said, quote, "He is elite at messaging with a team, especially with an NFL team, and how you deal with players and how you confront anything that gets in the way of winning without being confrontational. To me, that's an art." So what he saw up close and personal was the messaging, meaning you get in front of a team, what you're sharing with them on a week-to-week basis to get them to run through a brick wall for you. But how when a player may not respond to that messaging, he's not the type of guy that's going to get up in your grill and get involved in a screaming match. He's going to find a way to pull that out of the player without essentially, as Monken used it, being confrontational. So I thought those were two interesting takeaways that Monken provided during his Cleveland Browns presser, where what I love is when individuals talk, I like when they give John tangible evidence. You know, don't just speak to me in general principles. Tell me what you took away, but then when you give me the Mark Andrews play call, I really absorb that. So, you know, I think it says a lot about what Harbaugh saw in Monken and what the Browns now see in him and what rubbed off on him, who had been a proven coordinator on both levels, college and the NFL.
And also how, even though John Harbaugh is a CEO head coach, he is going to be involved in how these things work on both sides of the football.
Absolutely.
And he's the way they want to get done. 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. I gave my spiel on them a couple days ago, so if you want to go check it out, you can.
You gave a spiel on Todd Monken? Can I go back and watch that?
No, on Nagy.
Okay, I wanted to make sure. I was like, I didn't realize you delved that into Todd Monken. Okay.
No, I did not sit there and watch the whole press conference. I must admit I did not.
Gotcha. Well, see, that's why you rely on me.
He's also a bit of an interesting personality, that Todd Monken.
He is, yeah.
Yes.
No, I thought he was very engaging.
Yes.
I mean, you know me. I don't love to take away much from what individuals say at a presser. We've seen that, and we've been there and done that. But sometimes you do pick up on some interesting things that may not have anything to do with X's and O's, but just what they learned, what they experienced. And I thought Monken, compared to any other coach, is very good at providing examples. And now I can understand, and I've been a huge fan of him from an offensive play caller, you know, even going back to when he was with Jameis Winston and Dirk Cutter in Tampa Bay. Now you can see why his messaging and his schemes resonate with players, just the way that he handles himself in the court of public opinion.
All right, 201-939-4513. Let's lead things off with Rob in Connecticut. Rob, what's going on, man?
Hey, gents, how's it going today?
We're good. What's going on?
Not too much. You know what? I wasn't calling about the Super Bowl, but you brought up Sam Darnold, and I just wanted to bring something up about him. I think it's the most interesting case in the world. It's sort of, you know how when you take a risk on somebody, like a long shot, and if they return anything, it's like lightning in a bottle.
Sure.
You know, well, Sam Darnold is like the reverse. You have the lightning in the bottle, and all these teams have done the best to get rid of the person that they could have had for like a shot in the dark, and then they get rid of it. So it's like they had the lightning in the bottle, and then they got rid of the lightning in the bottle. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
Rob, I would say this.
Soda.
The other lesson we can learn from all this is that aside from maybe some of the very special quarterbacks that could, kind of make it work no matter what's going on around them, 90% of the quarterbacks in the National Football League, if they're going to be successful, they need a good ecosystem around them. And it took Sam Darnold a long time. He did have to develop and get better. He was not ready when he first came into the NFL. Remember, he had not played quarterback for a long time. He only played a couple years in college. He needed development. And most quarterbacks, and I'm talking about anyone after the top 5, right? The Herberts, the Dak Prescotts, the Jordan Loves, the Trevor Lawrences, the Jalen Hurtses. Like, these are all really good NFL quarterbacks. But if they don't have a good ecosystem around them, they're not going to play well enough to win a Super Bowl. So I think, Rob, that's the other lesson you take out of this. And I think that's why some of these teams kept bailing on Darnold. Now, you can't blame the 49ers. They had a really good quarterback in place, and they wanted to stick with him. But for those other teams, look, they just were not able to be patient enough and put enough around the player to get the most out of that investment.
Yeah, he had nowhere near this environment with the Jets and the Panthers. I mean, those are the two teams, if anything. I would not criticize any of the other organizations.
Well, the Vikings probably should have stuck with him. But other than that, yes.
Certainly. But listen, Kevin O'Connell, did a masterful job with Sam Darnold.
Yep.
That, to me, was more of an issue between the general manager and the coach, as we're later now learning with the GM being fired, not necessarily seeing eye to eye in terms of resources for the quarterback. But I'm not going to take away from what Kevin O'Connell did with Darnold for a season. They gave him the environment, he thrived. They just chose not to then reward him financially because they had already drafted a quarterback in J.J. McCarthy.
Well, and when he got really sick too, and that threw him off when he was with I believe he got meningitis or something like that, and that really threw him off. He got some kind of disease that, really saps your strength. And I know that was a big curveball, if you can remember. That was like 2019 or something.
That was with the Jets, right?
Yeah.
That was with the Jets when he got sick, correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Not the reason why I called. I just wanted to bring that up.
No, fair point.
I'm actually very positive about Matt Nagy, and I can't for the life of me. And I'm just, maybe you can walk me through it, talk me off the ledge, or talk everybody else off the ledge, because I'm fine. What is the deal? Like, some of these content creators, I get it. They're not. Matt Nagy wasn't like, for some reason they had a love affair with Cliff Kingsbury, who, in my opinion, is a one-trick pony with that air raid. You know what I mean? So I'm glad that we didn't get Mr. Air Raid. I like Cliff Kingsbury, but I'm glad that we didn't get him because he's like a system guy. But anyway, the point is, some of these content creators, not only are they dissatisfied with Matt Nagy, they're already giving up. And like Fisk Vegas, for example, giving up on, like, already calling like a lost season because they got, Matt Nagy. What is wrong with Matt Nagy? Everybody loves the guy. What is the deal? Why are people hating on Matt Nagy so much? Can you rationalize this, please?
All right. Well, you're trying to put me in shoes of people that I don't agree with, but that's fine. I will. No, I hear you. I hear you. I will.
I don't want to do that.
No. You're fine, Rob. You're fine. Look, I think there is such a stink on him from how it went in Chicago as a head coach, and how poorly it went. I understand. And I think he didn't call plays in Kansas City. The Chiefs' offense the last 2 years has deteriorated a little bit. It has not been as good as it was previously. So I think fans see that, and they freak out a little bit. And look, I get it too. Like, those are facts. Those things did happen. But you have to look at the why behind those things happen. Like, did the Chiefs' offense deteriorate because Matt Nagy went back there? No, of course not. It's because Travis Kelce got old. They traded Tyreek Hill, and the offensive line didn't perform well. Like, and they could have run the football. So I understand some of the fans' concerns. I do, and I don't think all of them are necessarily, completely, unhinged lunacy. But I do think you have to see how Harbaugh directs him to run the offense. And I talked about this on Wednesday. Do I love the fact that he's in shotgun as much as he is? No, I'd rather be under center more. I would like to see him run more under center play action than maybe he has in Kansas City. So there are some things that I don't love about what the Kansas City offense did. But like I said on Wednesday, we don't know how much of that was Andy Reid and how much of that was Matt Nagy. So it's very hard to separate those two as to what was going on in Kansas City. But again, I think the real reason when, bolts and nuts, they are just not happy with what happened in Chicago. He kind of became a laughing stock there for whatever reason. We've seen that with coaches here. Like Ben McAdoo ended up becoming a running joke. Ben McAdoo, there was a great article on ESPN Day. He's been a very valuable coach for the Patriots, who are in the Super Bowl, by the way. So that's my take, Lance, as to why fans have kind of had the adverse reaction to the way they have.
Yeah, and I think also just the mixed results in terms of quarterback development, too, from what happened in Chicago is probably something else that other individuals are looking at. But remember, environment shapes the quarterback, as we were just talking about. The Giants are not identical to the Bears, nor are the Chiefs. So 3 different scenarios, and also different talent around the quarterback. So, all of that has to be taken into consideration. The other thing that I wouldn't dismiss, too, is remember, Harbaugh and Andy Reid go way back to when Harbaugh was on Philadelphia's staff. So anything that Harbaugh needed to know about Nagy, he learned from his mentor, Andy Reid. Now, even though Kansas City has moved on from Matt Nagy and brought back Eric Bieniemy, you could be sure that Harbaugh got all of the backstory of whatever happened with Kansas City's offense over the last 2 years, or why Andy Reid is going in a different direction, from the direct source. And if he trusts anybody in NFL circles, Andy Reid would be atop the list.
Oh,
and it's a relationship-dependent profession, where it's not to say that you always bring in your best friends, but you normally rely on feedback from individuals who you trust. And that's the other reason why, regardless of what happened in Nagy's past, Harbaugh has a good enough relationship with Andy Reid to hear it directly from the horse's mouth,
and if you
as opposed to anything else.
And if you read anything, those two guys are super tight. Super duper duper tight. Rob, you got anything else?
Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah.
College football. Now, Dan Villari, what do you think of him? Because I'm a Syracuse fan, but our quarterback, Steve Angeli, got hurt during the Clemson game, and that threw off our entire season. So a lot of the Syracuse talent may have gone unnoticed because there was no quarterback after the Clemson game this year.
Yeah, I have not watched him, Rob, and appreciate the call. I have not watched him in full yet this year. I watched him at the Senior Bowl. I thought he looked pretty good. I would say he's an early day 3 type of pick, round 4, something like that, maybe round 5, and I think that's where he goes, but I have not done my full evaluation of him yet.
I also, if you're going to apply it to the Giants, I really don't think drafting a quarterback is the biggest priority, even if you wait for
tight end. He's tight end.
I'm sorry. Well, hasn't he played quarterback though previously, or had some play? I thought.
That's a good question. I don't know.
No, I thought he had some background in that department. Yeah, his at Michigan. He played a little bit of quarterback.
Oh, did he?
When he was a freshman.
I was not aware of that.
That's what I had. I thought I saw that. Yeah, that's I'm bringing up his game log. No, he's been a tight end over the last few years, but he does have quarterback background.
Like I said, I have not done my evaluation yet.
No, well, that's why
yes.
I could have been seeing some things.
No, you got it.
I thought I had seen that in passing. But yes, in terms of the tight end position for the Giants, remember, they've had some young guys over the last few years. Even if you want to go down that road, how it applies to them, I would wonder. I know Harbaugh with Baltimore has utilized multiple tight ends, and we just talked about Mark Andrews.
And different types of tight ends, too, by the way.
Sure.
Likely is very different than Andrews, who is very different than Todd Heap.
In terms of what they
bring. Who is very different than, they have, who's the... Charlie Kohler's there, too, from Iowa State. So they've had a lot of different types of tight ends there, too. So I'm curious to see how much maybe does Harbaugh want Daniel Bellinger back. That's a big question they're going to have to answer this offseason as a free agent.
Yep. But I guess until we see that, I'll combine both. I started off talking about quarterback. I'll put tight end up there. I don't know how pressing that is going to be even when the draft comes around, depending on what occurs during the course of free agency, because I
Again.
just think that there's some options at least
Yeah, it's
for them
hard
to utilize.
It's hard to talk about what the Giants would do in the draft right now when you have one of your top wide receivers a free agent, one of your top offensive tackles a free agent, one of your top tight ends a free agent, one of your top cornerbacks a free agent. And an inside linebacker, Micah McFadden, too, by the way. So you have 5 players there that are starters for you at important positions that are free agents. Whether or not the Giants bring those guys back will impact what their needs are in the draft. Now, does need dictate what you do in the draft? Absolutely not. That would be foolish. But it's certainly something that you take into consideration when you're making those decisions. So we'll have to wait to see what happens in free agency before we get to the draft and know exactly what the Giants' needs are. All right, let's go to Marco in Connecticut. He's up next. What's up, Marco?
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing?
We're good.
Hey, before I get to my Giants point, a little unrelated. I've probably shared in the past with you guys that I'm a big NBA fan, diehard New Orleans Pelicans fan, and I'll just say this.
Oh, yeah, tell me about Jose Alvarado. Lay it on me. What do you got? Nick's traded for him, by the way.
Oh, I didn't even say.
He
Okay.
is going to be a stud, and they are going to love him. The Knicks fans are absolutely going to love him. He's a New York City kid. He's all heart and I see the playoffs, the Garden rocking. Alvarado's going to come down. He's going to steal the ball like he's got this patented steal that he does, and he's going to hit a 3, and the place is going to rock. He's one of my favorites, and it's good for him.
Nick's also announced, by the way, that it looks like Deuce McBride might miss the rest of the regular season with a core muscle injury.
Well, he's been banged up over the course of the regular season, yeah.
But, yeah, I think that'll be – Marco, how the hell did you become a Pelicans fan?
And quickly, I grew up with the Charlotte Hornets in the '90s.
Oh, Larry Johnson, Zoe, that makes sense. I got it.
Muggsy, yeah, Del Curry.
So when they moved to New Orleans, I stuck with them, and and it's just
Tony Bennett.
It's nothing good. It's really never anything good with the Pelicans.
Were you a big Matt Geiger fan, Marco?
With a big who?
Matt Geiger fan?
Well, that's the later version.
Absolutely. Yeah. He was a former Heat player.
Yep.
I loved.
Kenny Gaddison?
Glenn Rice is my all-time favorite.
Okay, good luck,
Glenn Rice. Yep, sure.
Yeah, number 41. All right, so before we lose your entire crowd.
Yeah, I think we might have already. Go ahead, Marco. Sorry.
Well, we like naming Charlotte random Hornets.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll do it again, guys. Hey, I was thinking about this. When there's defensive coaches that come in, like a defensive coordinator or even like a secondary coach, they may ask the players to play with like a certain type of technique that, I think like something that we go back to is, Deontay Banks was asked to play a certain way under Wink, and then maybe his technique was asked to be a little different.
Mark, absolutely. Depending on the system, different players will be asked to do different things on the field. Correct, absolutely, 100%.
So my question for you guys is, does that relate also to the offensive line? So
yes.
And I think but so with that said, though, we do not have an offensive, I don't think there's been any reports of an offensive line coach.
Nope.
For example, if Matt Nagy says, "Hey, I believe that the offense should look this way," right, and like same thing, right, technique wise, how he views certain things to be played. But if they're going to hire an offensive line coach, I think it would go 10 degrees deeper into what that looks like. And my overall point basically is, last night there's this huge news with Stoutland and the Eagles, and the Giant fans are saying like, hey, Giants should bring him in, and I 100% would love that. But I was wondering, like, can you just literally pluck any offensive line coach into an OC and say, like, maybe Nagy and Stoutland have never worked together. So it's like, can something like that work? Or does it really still depend on what the OC wants the offense to look like?
Marco, that is a great question. And no, I don't think you can just plug and play. Because the offensive line coach, even not talking about physical technique, how you block, things like that, protections, right? How do you run protections against blitzes? There are different ways to do that. In terms of system to system. And an offensive coordinator might have for example, the Kyle Shanahan McVay tree has a very specific way that they run protections and adjustments to blitzes. It's very specific. An offensive line coach from a different system might not want to run it that way, and that could be a problem. So there has to be some conversation between the coach you bring in and the OC that they can work together on those things. Now, some coaches will be more flexible than others. I think it depends on the coach and the team. John Harbaugh might have a specific way he wants protections done, and he told Jim and he told Matt Nagy. I knew I was going to do that at least once, calling Matt Nagy Jim Nagy. That there is a specific way. Yeah. I want you, now the GM of the Oklahoma Sooners.
Correct. Yeah.
That I want you to run your protections a certain way, and Nagy might have already agreed to that. I don't know the answer to that, but yes, there are specific ways an offensive line is asked to play, even how you scheme up certain run plays, all those things. It can be very distinct from offensive system to offensive system, and therefore offensive line coach to offensive line coach. And where I thought you were going with this, Marco, and I was ready with this answer too, but I'm going to give it to you anyway because I thought this was also going to be a good question. I think the best offensive line coaches will tell an offensive lineman, all right, I prefer you to make this block this way, doing it this way. But if you could achieve it and do it, and you're better at it doing it a different way, I'm okay with that. And that's something I know Carmen Brasillo did when he was here, where a player was like, yeah, I know that's how you coach it, coach, but look, I do it this way, I'm better at this, and I can get it done this way. He was okay with that. So I think that's the other part of it. How does the OC and the O-line coach then adjust their scheme to make sure the players that they have and what they're good at can fit in and succeed with the way they want to run their offense up front too. So I think those are the two parts of it. But yeah, I think that's a really good question because there are distinct ways you coach things up from a run game perspective and a protection, protections type of scheme that do very, very much from offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and the question that you just posed is mainly the reason why when new head coaches come in and they hire new coordinators, you see a turnover with respect to the staff. Because, and I'll give you two examples this cycle. Brian Dable, just went to Tennessee. Who did he bring over? He brought over Carmen Brasillo, who John just referenced. Well, because Dable's going to implement his offense, and Brasillo has a background in exactly what Dable's going to run. So there's familiarity. Sean Mannion was just hired as the Eagles offensive coordinator, and one of the reasons, even though they've been moving him around already, that Jeff Stoutland, very well-respected offensive line coach, is not going to be coaching that position is because Mannion, who's now going to be running something different, is probably going to want to bring in an offensive line coach that has some familiarity with the scheme. Not to say that Stoutland couldn't adapt.
Oh, and I think they would have loved to have Stoutland stay there, and they would have adapted. But he seemed to be a little annoyed about how way a couple things went last year without him being involved in those conversations.
Correct, and that's why I hinted at he was already being moved around prior to this. But the point is, we're seeing examples where new OCs come in, and maybe the head coach stays the same or wherever it may be, and the head coach is even going to give the offensive coordinator some influence and say in some of the position coaches who are going to be responsible to guiding the players to familiarize themselves and execute the scheme that the OC is going to run. So I think both of those things go hand in hand, and I think you do run the risk if you force coaches on coordinators who have not worked well or don't have any history together.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for breaking it down. I'm just interested to see where they go with this. I wanted Brasillo to stay here. I know. Almost every Giants fan did, but
so do we.
The way things have shaken out too now, it's like it's a little nerve-wracking, but I think it's more settling now that they have the OC in place, and let's see where they go now with the next big domino and coaching hire that's essential. But
thank you, Marco.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it, man. By the way, at TTom13, Kendall Gill was one of his favorites as well. So
you had thrown out that name, yeah.
Who was it a Hornet or was it a Buck? The player that passed away in the car accident racing with his teammate.
Bobby Phills was a Hornet.
That was a
with
Hornet.
David Wesley.
That was a Hornet.
Those were the two guys.
David Wesley.
Yep.
That was the other one. Okay, that's right. That's what I was trying to remember.
Bobby Phills, whose son I covered because he went on to play for Yale.
Really?
Trey Phills, had a
I
very
did not
nice
know
career.
that.
Yeah, college basketball.
Got it. All right, there we go. See, I did not remember.
You learn something new every day.
Vlade Divac,
even when the Charlotte Hornets.
Who got to the Hornets in the Kobe Bryant trade.
Correct. Yeah, well, now
People
to me, this is the second phase of the 90s Hornets.
Yes, of course.
The first phase is LJ, Zoe, and Muggsy Bogues. Then the second phase is the Phils, the Wesleys, the Divotses, and so forth.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, Del Curry was a huge part of that, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Who's going to have his number retired by the Hornets, unless it's already happened,
Very good. Let's go to Manny in Southern California. Manny, what's going on?
Hey, John. Hi, Lance. Good to talk with you. Seems like an age ago when I was on and making a case for Kafka as the head coach. And so, just as an aside, before I get to my main point, I just wanted to point out what I don't think many have noticed since, that the two people that Harbaugh kept from the initial existing regime were the two relative unknowns to most Giant fans that Kafka elevated to offensive and defensive coordinator with the gutsy move of getting rid of Shane Bowen and moving to Charlie and Tim Kelly as the coordinators, people who didn't have that experience, and yet Harbaugh kept them both on.
Yep.
I have the gut notion, and nobody's ever going to be able to prove it, but I think if they had known a week earlier that Monken wasn't going to be the offensive coordinator, I would not have been at all surprised if Harbaugh had tapped Kafka for the job.
Yeah, I mean, assuming Kafka will want to take that job, which I don't know if that's something he wanted to do, is stay here after being the interim head coach and stick it around. I'm guessing probably because he's not calling plays. He's in Detroit, right? And
Yeah.
he wouldn't call plays there. But I have no idea what that interest level would have been. I'm sure Andy Reid would have put in a good word for Mike Kafka as well when he talked to him. But, that can get dicey sometimes. You become the interim head coach and then you leaves. And, that happened with Spags, right? When Spags was here, he took over from McAdoo. Then Shermer comes in. I mean,
And Shermer had a history with him. They were together with the Rams, and
Right.
he chose not to keep him.
but that can get
Yeah.
awkward sometimes when you go from
Absolutely get
interim head
awkward,
coach
sure.
and then going back to a coordinator. So I'm not sure how that would have worked, Manny. But yeah, would it have made sense from a logical 20,000-foot view? Sure, it would have.
I just think, in terms of evaluating Kafka's talent, if we believe that I think all do, that how great a selector of his personnel and staff is that Harbaugh is, that Kafka's showed a lot in a very short period of time, that last month or so of the season, that he has a lot of that. And I wish him very well, and he'll probably be a head coach again coming down to in Detroit. But let me get to my main point. Yesterday, Paul brought up this interesting thing with Laura Oakman and Matt Nagy, that she's, since her NFL sideline and other duties, has started this business, kind of an executive business on the side, of helping people in a thing she calls the blind spot, of interviewing anonymous, making a report, an extensive report of people you worked with over time, to give you the insight into what you are good at and what you're not good at. And she did this originally with Dan Quinn.
Yep.
And then he is where he is now. And she did it at Matt Nagy's request. And he got a 45-page document after interviewing 50 former players, assistants, staff, everybody that she personally interviewed, and anonymously gave him the report of all the...
Now, Manny, are you sure it's anonymous? The way I read the story is that there were actually names on it, where they actually did have the name to the complaint. I could be wrong about that, but that's how I read it, at least.
No, I would ask, I bring this up because I, along with many, were, kind of at least ho-hum on Matt Nagy from his accomplishments, and certainly he wasn't anybody that was being bantered about as a favorite for the job. But there's an interview. I don't know who the person is interviewing him. It's about a 12-minute thing on YouTube where they're actually showing PowerPoints of the quotes, Nagy responding to both the good and several bad about his time and what he learned over time, especially from his head coaching career at Chicago. And he literally micromanaged. I mean, I think is probably the single biggest criticism of him was that, he was the head coach now. He came from the offensive side of the ball, and there was so much that's important to the job, and he focused too much on the offensive job and micromanaging the play calling and the things that an OC would normally do. And I think his insight was incredible, and the positives were that players would go to the end for him. There were several quotes in that video of players who said, this is the guy I would want, if I ever got inducted in the Hall of Fame or my funeral or whatever. And it really, and listening to his response to the various quotes, which they did say were anonymous. So, and that's apparently how Nagy wanted it. So he didn't want it to be able to say, well, that guy had always had it in me, or I knew he wasn't any good, or whatever. It really has changed things. And so for all the Giants fans who are sort of ho-hum, or like we missed the boat on Charlie Weiss Jr. or Davis Webb or others, and clearly I think, as Lance pointed out, that wasn't ever going to happen based on Harbaugh's track record, that he was going to hire somebody that really had never called plays before and hadn't been an OC in the NFL. So
yeah,
but it made me feel a whole lot better than I did after some of the other people that we liked were falling off the boards for obvious other positions.
Well, I mean,
one downside I'd say, though, is I think this guy, if we have a great year, and I certainly hope we do, and I'm confident we'll at least be 500, I don't think Matt Nagy is going to be here for very long, because there's a good chance he'll get another head coaching job, and that's probably why he took this job so quickly.
Well, I mean, I think that's why he didn't want to, stay with the Chiefs, because he wanted a chance to call plays again, which obviously didn't appreciate the call. Thank you, Manny. Would have a chance to latch on with other team and do exactly this.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to bring back the Todd Monken story.
And by the way, those quotes were anonymous. I was wrong about that.
Yeah, I just
correct.
saw a YouTube video which was labeled an anonymous breakdown, in which Matt Nagy was reflecting on all those quotes. But it's funny, Todd Monken did the same thing. He left Georgia to go to Baltimore to get an NFL OC job again so he could become attractive to be a head coach. That's how the cycle works. So I'm sure if you have a private conversation with Matt Nagy, of course he wants to be a head man again. And I think that's where most of this reflection comes in. I don't know how necessarily beneficial this is in terms of him running an offense, because the problem with micromanaging comes into play when you're a head coach. You still want to be on top of the offense as opposed to empowering maybe your offensive coordinator. When you're an OC, you're only in charge of one facet of the team. He doesn't have to worry about the defense. He doesn't have to worry about the special teams. He doesn't have to worry about media interviews with respect to the entire team or roster management with the general manager. So these lessons is more of what he would apply to me when he would potentially get a new position as a head coach, as opposed to an offensive coordinator. But Josh McDaniels, who we were talking about earlier, is another great example. He didn't pan out as a head coach, not once but twice, settled back into OC roles and thrived. So we've seen that story play out too. The other thing I wanted to add to what the last caller said with respect to Mike Kafka and promoting internally to OC and DC Tim Kelly as well as Charlie Bullen. Tim Kelly, he may have been somewhat of an unknown commodity to Giants fans, but Kelly was a polished offensive coordinator with Tennessee and Houston.
That's
so
correct.
I'm not trying to take anything away from Kafka, but the point of that he took a real flyer on Kelly, I think, is a bit misleading, because Tim Kelly had been empowered running offenses before. So Kafka knew that. He knew he had the background. I think that's a big reason why he empowered him. Bullen was more of a roll the dice.
Correct.
Hadn't called plays before. But Kelly, I would not put under the same umbrella and in the same category as Bullen. But I would agree with the overall sentiment by the last caller that I think Kafka, and I said this on previous shows, deserves a lot of credit for how he handled when he took over as the interim coach in terms of opening himself up to the entire team, making some good, savvy decisions in terms of empowering coordinators, and you hope that that does bode well for him as he now moves on to the Lions and tries to pave a way back to that top position.
All right, we got some YouTube comments here. Let's roll through them. Rob Ford, 5601, love the show. Always tune in from England. Well, we appreciate that. Cheerio. At Ethan Burrows, at S4K. Can I please get a shout out? Love your guys' videos. Sure, there you go, Ethan. You got one. Aiden Fink, go Seahawks. Sorry, Tommy DeVito and Pearson Butler. There are more connections. You know what? Both teams actually do have a number of giant connections. I mentioned Ben McAdoo, who's with the Patriots. You have Tom Quinn, who's with the Patriots as well as an assistant special teams coach, who was here for a long time as a good special teams coach.
Yep.
I know Giant fans don't think he is, but guys, trust me, he was. Tommy DeVito's there. Then in Seattle, you have Julian Love and Leonard Williams, obviously. So, and by the way, Durden, the backup defensive lineman for the Patriots, was a giant in the offseason over the summer.
Yeah, Mike Vrabel even talked about at a recent press conference when the Patriots were playing the Giants and the impact that he's had.
So there are connections. Here we go.
Yeah.
Bruce D. Richards, holy smokes, that sweater on Schmeelk is so dang fresh. Well, I can't disagree. Lance could never pull it off. Hairline at all. That's true. Lance does a better hairline than
I'm
me.
not a sweater guy, so I'm not. Sweatshirt. I'm not a big.
You know what a sweatshirt?
I like the hooded sweatshirts more
like the
than
hoodies?
the actual
The crew neck?
sweatshirts you're wearing. Yeah.
I want a figure eight of Schmeelk in that giant sweater. So fresh and clean. I got to tell you, there are not
Is
many.
that new? Is that relatively
Yes,
new?
it is new
This
this year.
You've worn this before.
It's probably the second or third
Gotcha.
time I've worn it. I like it, though.
Yeah. No, it is.
Different
It's
color.
a nice look. I'm not going to deny that.
Johnny Mac, what do you think? Does this match the color of the pants on the Legacy uniform from Game 1 last year? I would say that's probably true, right? I'm with you on that. Okay, cool. All right, next one, we got Scotty Young, 1669. Things are looking to take shape for our Giants. I'm still looking forward to the season. Well, Scott, you got to be patient. It's a long way off. I still have concerns regarding who's going to be the Giants' offensive line coach. We're waiting to see on that too, Scott. We'll see what they end up doing there. T-Tom 13 again. The Eagles' line coach left, but do the Eagles still have his rights? Actually, I was going to get to that when the caller when Marco brought up the offensive line coach. And my understanding is, and all the reports seem to indicate, that the Eagles still hold the rights to Jeff Stoutland.
They do.
And I'm no genius, but something probably tells me they're not going to let him leave to a division rival to be their offensive line coach.
To do that. Yeah. I mean,
You make the phone call and you see what you can do, but that would be a little surprising to me.
Well, and also, John, the multiple reports that came out had indicated that he is going to stay around the organization. So my guess is, I don't know whether it's the front office, but he probably will have some type of a role outside of the day-to-day coaching situation.
The way I'm interpreting things is that Jeff Stoutland would love to go get another job with another team, but the Eagles are like, nope, we don't think that's going to be happening here. So we'll see how that goes.
Listen, other teams have denied candidates from having interviews. It's
That's
how
their
the game is played.
Yep.
They're entitled to do that.
At 11, Imani isn't Bolin getting an interview for the DC at Arizona. I did see that report. I don't know when that interview is taking place, but that should be happening.
But he is getting interest from Mike LaFleur, who is just named head coach. Yep.
Now we have now we have two. They're brothers, right? Mike and Matt.
Yeah, Matt is with the Packers, and Mike is now.
I would gather
with the Cardinals.
It's the first time in NFL history you have two pairs of brothers as head coaches in the NFL at the same time.
Well, the Harbaughs.
Two pairs of brothers at
multiple.
the same time.
Okay. I want to say it is. I did some digging on that front.
Did you really?
I can't. Well, because it piqued my interest too. It also piques my interest with now we've got another father-son tandem with Kubiak, assuming the Raiders job. In terms of a father and a son.
Yeah, but Gary's not coaching now.
No, but that's still, listen, for two members of the same family, I mean, there's only 32 jobs in the NFL. There were even few before expansion. So
Chris Shula could be another one whenever he eventually gets his head coaching opportunity.
So, and that's perhaps third generation we're talking about with respect to that clan. So, that piqued my interest. Yeah, I don't think we've ever had, because the other brothers that come to mind weren't even head coaches, the Ryans, with Rex and Rob. But Rob was only a defensive coordinator. Rex was only the head coach. So, and of course, their father.
Nothing else comes to mind for me.
I mean, there's been the Schottenheimers. Marty was a head coach, and his brother was a defensive coordinator. So I'm
what was
just
his
throwing
brother's
out.
name? I don't remember Marty's brother.
The first name is escaping me. He was on staff.
I didn't mean to put you on. I didn't mean to put you
that's
on,
fine.
on the spot there. I did not remember. Marty Schottenheimer's brother was his own defensive coordinator.
I
did not remember that.
Yep. Yeah, there's a third generation now as I'm talking about that because of Brian now.
Well, no, that's a second generation.
Second generation, that's right. Yeah, because
yes.
he's the uncle to Brian. Let me look up the name here. I will find it because I do.
All right, well, while you find it, let me go to the next YouTube comment. At David Carden7282, question for the show. Given the reports from yesterday, what about Dawn Aponte should have us excited about her hiring? I did see that report. That's like an operations behind the scenes. If reports are to be believed, and again, we're not confirming them, that's kind of like the Kevin Abrams role that he had when he was here, so contracts and stuff like that. So I don't think you'll necessarily see a ton of changes in terms of how the Giants operate or anything like that. But I know she's very capable. She's been around the league and with the league for a while, so certainly knows what she's doing.
Yeah, has a background in terms of, as you mentioned, salary cap, operations management. So, this is just another example, assuming that these reports are accurate, that Harbaugh, and he had indicated that he was going to implement some changes and surround himself with people, not even from an X's and O's standpoint, but just, what he was familiar with and comfortable with how Baltimore ran its things.
Kurt
with respect to the
Schottenheimer.
Giants. Yeah, I just was going to mention that too. Yeah, Kurt Schottenheimer, and he was his defensive coordinator with Kansas City, with Washington, so with a few places they worked together.
I forgot about that. I did not recall that.
So there's been a few brothers, but they have not both been head coaches. So to circle back and answer your question, I think this is the first time in NFL history that we have had a pair of brothers, as you worded it, in the league simultaneously.
David Wingate, another member of that Hornets team, who I should have remembered.
Yeah.
I was big NBA Live in this era from like 92 to 94, on good old Super Nintendo. So David Wingate played a lot. And then the guy I forgot, former Knick, Johnny Newman, was on that team as well,
Another one.
which I did not remember.
No, those Hornets teams were fun to watch.
They were. Tony Bennett, remember him?
Yeah,
Little guard.
Went on to coach Virginia in college.
Great singer,
Won
too.
national title. Yes, absolutely. It's amazing how he benefited from his vocal cords.
And such a long
and
career,
then,
too. The fact that he sang in like the 70s and 60s
True.
and then, managed to play in the 90s. I mean, it's really remarkable.
Sure, 100%. By the way, speaking of, his father was a well-known basketball coach. Not necessarily in the NBA, but he was very well-known in Wisconsin, where Tony grew up.
They are related to the college basketball coach Bennett now, right? Isn't there a Bennett that was he was somewhere in college basketball? I don't remember. Well, I think there was a Bennett.
I'd have to look up.
Right?
Yeah, I'm not 100%
Anyway.
sure. I just know that Tony Bennett's father was a well-respected and long-time college coach.
Mike Jaminski, does he get you?
Yeah, Mike
excited?
Kaminsky, who
the big center?
color commentator for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Oh, is he
for
really?
A stretch. I don't think he's
I did
still
not know
doing
that.
it, but he was. He went on to do color commentary. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing when you don't have But I have kids. All these things have floated on my head. You managed to maintain all of this random knowledge. God
90s
bless you. Good for
NBA
you,
is
man.
my wheelhouse, so
Good for you.
I love this stuff. I could sit here all day.
good
and we
for
could
you.
go over trivia.
I know. It's fantastic. All right.
Hopefully somebody will call up some random Knicks future trade, and we could break down another squad in addition to the Hornets.
Lance, good stuff,
Yeah,
my friend.
absolutely.
Always a pleasure. Lance
Got
Medow,
it.
I'm John Schmeelk. Paul and I will be on tomorrow. We'll give our Super Bowl predictions. By the way, give me your prediction. Who do you think is going to win?
I've been going back and forth, and I'm going to say that this is going to be the alternative result of what happened 10 years ago.
So will the Seahawks pick off the Patriots on the final play, or do the Seahawks throw the touchdown this time on the final play?
No matter how you want to
Which
spin
one?
it, I like Seattle's defense doing enough to fluster Drake May and making the field shortened or something with special teams for Sam Darnold that I don't necessarily see happening for Drake May. So I'm going to give the edge. I think we're going to have a competitive game because both of the teams, as we went over, good defenses, offenses that are not electric, but there's something about the overall balance of Seattle that I find a lot more attractive, closing the door and winning some of these closer games than per se New England. And I'm not taking anything away from the Patriots. I've actually defended them a lot for people claiming that they didn't play anybody. Listen, you play who's on your schedule, and they beat the teams they were supposed to. So why would I criticize a team for that? But even if you look at that Denver game, remember, the Patriots, if they don't get that defensive touchdown, who knows where they would be from an offensive standpoint. I understand it was snowy conditions. It was not clean, but there's going to be ideal conditions, and I would give Seattle an edge in terms of their ability to manufacture points with all three of their facets a little bit more consistently than what New England has to offer. So I'll give the slight edge to the Seahawks.
Enjoy the game, Lance.
Absolutely, you too.
Talk to you next week. I am John Schmeelk. That's all the time we have for Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. From the Giants Podcast Studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. For Lance Medow, I'm John Schmeelk. I swear to you,
The difficult things on this show, getting our names right.
I do know. I actually do know my
I hope
last
so.
name. By the
Yes.
way. Paul and I will be with you tomorrow at 12:30.
Would you like a redo? How about you get your name straight?
For Lance Medow, I'm
There
John
we go.
Schmeelk. We will see you tomorrow at 12:30 for
Exquisite.
another Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Good
Until then,
execution.
I try to talk too fast. That's what happens. See you tomorrow.